we will follow.
Hi, welcome to Trinity Talk Live, water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective. I am Ken Coughlin. Thank you very much for joining us today. We got a very special episode here today, one where we're kind of focusing on some practical advice for you out there. Those of you that are Christians going out into the world for the rest of the week, going out into whatever your job, your profession may be. We're going to be talking about a little bit today about balancing those two, and I've brought two resident experts with me to talk about this. I always love saying that. And I'm not just saying that you guys are experts because in different senses you're both my boss, but that does have something to do with it. Okay, so why don't we take a second? I'll have each of you introduce yourselves and say what your role is here at the church and something else fun about yourself. Let's start right here. Who's this gentleman to my right?
I'm Rick Grant. I'm the executive director here at the church. The remaining 40, 50 hours of the week, I'm an advertising vice president for a small agency in Towson.
Awesome. How long have you been doing that?
33 years.
Excellent. I always found that interesting. I don't know what it is, but advertising just somehow seems exciting.
It was. The world has changed with the internet.
I imagine.
Yeah.
I imagine. And who is this gentleman down here?
Well, I'm Mark Cogar, and here at the church, I'm the operations director. And I also have my own business. I share with my brother. It's a family-owned business of 38 years, and it's a commercial printing company.
Excellent. So what's your title again?
Operations director.
Are you sure? It seems like every time I ask you on the show, it's something different, Mark.
Well, it's operations director today.
So next time we're on,
we'll see something else. Exactly.
Okay. See what happens in the fall.
Well, thank you all for coming on. I appreciate it. Before we dive into the actual main topic that we're scheduled for today, I do want to make some very, very important announcements. First of all, I want to make sure everybody realizes that next week is Labor Day, so we're not going to be having an episode next week. That's because typically we film these on Monday, and, well, church is going to be closed on Monday. So no episode next week, but we'll be back the following week. Speaking of the following week, we have some really exciting things coming up. There's going to be, by the time this airs, it might already be on the YouTube channel. I don't know, a more formal announcement that goes into more detail. But I want to let you know we've got some really exciting things coming up. We already have our 4 regular shows that we have airing here on the Trinity Joppa channel. We are actually adding 3 more, hoping to have, with 7 regular shows, hopefully there's going to be something out there that's going to reach out to you, that's going to appeal to you, and you can tell your friends and family about it. Starting on September 12th, we have our first monthly show starting. It's called In the World. And those of you that are longtime viewers of Trinity Talk Live will remember back when we first started, it started out with a kind of a 10-minute current event segment, which we did away with, I think, sometime in the spring. Well, a lot of people said they missed it, so we're actually bringing it back, but we're spinning it off into its own monthly show with a few tweaks. So it's not going to be exactly the same, but it's going to be really fun. So tune in for that. That's going to go. It's going to be on the second Wednesday of every month, and it's going to go up at 12 noon. The first one will be September 12th. Then starting Friday, September 14th at 9 o'clock in the morning, this is going to be another weekly show, Pocket-Sized Apologetics. This is something that's going to help prepare you to answer, why are you a Christian? What are the evidences and the grounding for that belief? Does it stand on a firm foundation? Well, I'll spoil the ending. Yes, it does. But what these are going to be is short 2-minute or less episodes, really short little snippets. Doesn't take up a whole lot of your time, but it's going to help prepare you for 1 Peter 3:15. Always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that you have. And then starting Saturday, September 15th is probably the most scary, terrifying, ambitious thing that we've tried to take on, and I'm comfortable enough with it now that I at least can start advertising it. I think it's going to work out, but it's still a little scary. When I was growing up, and I think when these gentlemen were growing up too, what was Saturday morning? Saturday mornings were
cartoons,
right? It wasn't Saturday morning without cartoons.
Right.
We're taking a stab at it. We are going to have our own animated program on Saturday morning, starting September 15th. It's going to be called Jake and Gracie, and it's going to be kind of like a children's message, but it's going to be delivered to your kids from these 2 new animated characters, Jake and Gracie. That's going to be air at 7 o'clock every Saturday morning starting September 15th, so make sure you tune in. And keep in mind, I'm saying air dates or air times, but these are YouTube on-demand programming. That's just when the shows go up. You can watch it anytime after that fits within your schedule. So there, the preliminaries are out of the way. Now let's dive in. What do you say? So I wanted to start out today with a passage from Colossians. It's probably going to be kind of familiar. It says chapter 3, verse 23, and it says, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters." And whatever you do. And so obviously, I think what that scripture can kind of reinforce for us is that being a Christian, our Christian faith is supposed to be who we are. We're not one person on Sundays and another person the rest of the week. Our faith should be influencing our entire lives. And we could probably talk for hours and hours on end if we were to keep it that broad, but I want to kind of focus it into just the professional world, because I think a lot of people struggle with that, is trying to balance and their faith and their profession, and sometimes they might see those in conflict. Sometimes they might feel kind of aimless as far as am I where I'm supposed to be, or whatever. A lot of people have a lot of questions like that. And so I wanted to ask you guys to come on to talk a little bit about how you see your faith influencing your professional lives. So why don't we start out with this? Tell us a little bit. Rick, you said you're in advertising.
Yeah.
I guess we'll start out generally. Ask you, how do you see your role, your faith, your Christian faith, influencing how you go about your daily life in advertising?
They've always said that people in advertising, that there are kind of three professions out there that are kind of sleazy: attorneys, advertising people, and used car salesmen.
We got
folks.
2 out of 3.
We got 2 out of 3 exactly. I tend to, I try to be as honest and upright and forthright with people as possible. Every business is out there to make a profit. I've worked with folks over the past 30 plus years who will gouge clients beyond belief to feather their own beds and to profit more than normal. I come from the camp of a decent profit, a fair profit is enough. Clients, companies work very hard for their money. We're not here to take it from them. We're here to do what's right and just for them.
You want something to add? How about your experience? Start just generally here.
Yeah, as a small commercial printer, we feel the same things. Actually, I work under Rick in some respects because the ad agencies funnel work down to the printers.
Right.
So I'm on the tail end of that. But so often, you try to instill in people, that quality of service that you do for them, fairness in price.
Right.
And we always don't get it on our end, but we try to do that. As a small family business, it's instilled in us from early on. My dad always raised us to be that way.
You guys both mentioned, profits and pricing and things like that. And I think that raises maybe the first topic that we can focus on a little bit here. And that's money. I mean, a lot of people will look at, will say, well, Jesus was poor. He was walking around, and then he talked about the fact it's easier for a rich man to make through the eye of the needle, yada, yada, yada. There's not anything wrong per se with running a business with the goal of making money. At least, well, maybe I shouldn't speak. Let me leave it up to you guys. Is there anything wrong with that being your goal? And if so, how does your Christian faith influence how you shape that goal?
No, I don't think it's wrong at all. I think every business is out there to make a profit, to take that money and spread it among the staff people and make sure that they're happy and they're well fed. It gets to a point where profits can be falsely increased or unfaithfully increased by gouging and things like that, and that's when one person might potentially walk away with a lot of gold at the end of the day.
Sure, absolutely. You figure you need profits to stay in business, to grow your business.
Right.
But the key is, what do you do with that profit? Do you make sure that your employees have good health care and other benefits so that they can be comfortable, work harder, create a better service for their customers, and grow?
Right.
And if you don't have some profit, that's hard to do.
Right.
But to exceed and to gouge, that's just not part of it.
Yeah, the company I work for now, I've been there for going on 12 years now. It's a small firm, and it's the most fair business I've ever seen in my entire life. The owner of the company just thinks about our clients and thinks about us fairly, which I find refreshing.
How do you view your obligation maybe to? You're both in management in some way, shape, or form. So I'm assuming are employees underneath you
right.
that you are maybe in different ways, but somehow responsible for. How do you view your responsibility as a manager for those employees?
Well, I could say as a small business, we really try to create that family environment, because creating a relationship with the staff is key. Be able to share with them that these personal relations. You don't want to see them suffer or struggle or have to battle trying to get health care and things like that. So
right.
we want to service them. Actually, I know they're employees, but as managers, I try to service my employees
part of your
and make
family.
sure they're taken care of. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've worked with firms where you've got 200 people running around the hallways, and where the CEO or the president or whomever doesn't know 90% of the people there. A smaller firm like that, everybody fairly intimately. You know about their children, their families, their situations, and all of that.
Yeah, my dad came from a big printing company, and he was just a number. And nobody cared who he was. He just had to make sure he punched in and worked hard all day, and he was out at the end of the day. He wanted to get as far away from that as he could when he started our small business. And he wanted to make sure his employees were partners. He didn't even say they were employees. My colleague, my partner, print partner. So it makes a difference. It means a lot.
I think there's something to be said, to be learned from, and I guess we're talking leadership in general here, any kind of leadership position, but, how did Jesus lead? What would Jesus do, so to speak? Well, he defined leadership through service.
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, not just in himself, but in marital relationships, husband-wife relationships. There was always, anytime he seemed to be defining any type of leadership or relationship, there was always a service element to it, and that's how you do it. I mean, he watched his disciples speak, which was unheard of at the time.
Right.
And I don't know. I just think that in the business world, especially for those of us that, if you are in management in some way, shape, or form, that's the mentality to approach it in, realizing that if you view your role as a leader, meaning that you are supposed to be serving those who work for you, then you're going to have happier employees.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times people are given a title and they say you're, this big manager or whatever. Unless you earn it, you gain the respect of your employees or the people under you, it's worthless. So you really have to serve others to make them understand and respect you as a leader,
and not being afraid to get down in the dirt with everyone else and getting something done. I've seen a lot of younger folks who will come in and in our company, people that will come in and don't want to do this, that, or the other. It's just that younger person mentality. I guess some of us older folks are willing to roll up our sleeves a little higher and climb around in the mud a little more to get things done.
Let me talk about that for a second. Let's kind of shift focus now from management to non-management, because we've all been there. Even there was a time, I'm sure, in your careers when you were on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you, if for those people that are in that kind of role where they're still maybe working their way up the ladder and that they're not in the management position, or when you were in those type of positions, how would your faith and the model that Jesus set for you at that time influence the way you perform your job in that kind of role?
Well, if you look at it, if you're serving a company, you're working for someone, you want to give them your very best. You want to do the best because they might not remember it directly, but everyone else, there's people that do see what you do and how you work and your work ethics. And that's what it's all about. You want to have good work ethics. You want to do the best you can because you're trying to glorify God in all you do every day. And that's what you need to do.
Working hard and smart is good when you're young because people do take notice of it. And it hopefully sticks with you your entire life.
Yeah, and if you do everything as if, like this passage from Colossians said, if you do everything as if you were doing it for God, and you ask yourself, there's a neat song lyric from, and it applies here and obviously broader than here, but I quote sometimes from Casting Crowns, and the song is called Life Song, and it says, I want to sign your name to the end of this day, knowing that my heart was true. And it's really powerful imagery. It's like, at the end of the day, or in this context, the end of your work day, can you, if you were to write down everything you did on that day and you were present it to God, could God sign off on the bottom of it saying, this was my work? Now sometimes that may mean, working very hard, doing every single thing your employer tells you to do. Other times, I'm looking at you, right? Because what you said earlier indicates to me that you probably confronted this sometimes. There are probably some things you've come across that maybe are in conflict with what your Christian values are. How do you handle that?
That's a very it's a very hard balance to work with, where the big boss will come in and say this needs to be done or that needs to be done and it needs to be billed accordingly to a client. It's like, well, no, we can't bill them for that. It's just not right to do it that way. If someone internally makes a mistake that is not a client cost, in good conscience, I'm not going to bill it to a client. It's something that the company has to deal with internally, and not pass that loss or that bill off to someone else. It's just it's the wrong thing to do.
How do you build up the courage to say that?
I think over years and getting to know people, I think you suddenly start to get a little thicker skin and a little more knowledge in your head. It's not something that a 21-year-old's going to run out of college and be able to master right away. If they are, then I tip my hat to them. But I think it's something that over time you learn the skill of kind of the art of negotiation and the art of getting things done right.
Tactfully, respectfully,
Right.
and yet firmly.
Right.
So practice makes perfect. Or maybe not perfect.
You
but
hope
practice
so.
makes better.
Right.
Exactly.
So, you ever come across anything like that, Mark?
Now, I'm kind of insulated from that because growing up with my dad through our family business, we've always had that ethics of making sure that we don't take advantage of people. We keep a
Right.
fair market value on all our products. So I can't say that I've ever encountered, even on the vendor side, where a vendor had supplied us with something and tried to gouge us. We've been fortunate in that respect.
Well, lucky you.
Yes.
Let's take somebody who's maybe starting out. I know I'm kind of working backwards in time here from management to non-management. Now let's say there's somebody that is just getting started out in the job market. Maybe they're fresh out of college and they're trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives. I'm curious if your faith, your Christian faith, in any way impacted your choice of vocation. Or I mean, obviously, well, I can throw the softball one here to Mark.
Yeah.
So when you decided to come work here for Trinity, Mark, did your faith influence your decision to do that at all?
Maybe just a little. Yeah, actually, is a blessing to have the opportunity to come here because I enjoy this so much. But on the other side of it, too, I still have a family of business and a family of employees
Right.
that I care a great deal about. So it makes it challenging. But yes, it's nice to be able to come to church.
How about advertising?
That's a they're really that's a hard one to answer because getting into that business 30 plus years ago, it was the 80s, it was a different world than it is today, and there were a lot of people who were not Christian minded at all or were not right minded for another term at all, that would do anything to anyone to get to the top.
You know what I found? Because as you've already identified, I belong to one of those two out of those three sleazy
Sorry.
professions. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough sometimes when you are surrounded by people, and I'm not going to name names or particular jobs. I've done a lot of jobs over my 2 decades as a career as a lawyer, working in a lot of different places, and I will just say that sometimes in some of those positions, certainly you're surrounded by people who do not share your faith and
Right.
don't share your values, and it's. Sometimes I come home feeling beaten down, like I've been kind of through the ringer, but you kind of sit back and you pray on it and you realize, well, I can't remember who said this to me. I'm going to give credit to my wife because she's usually the one that says wise things to me. It's probably her. That just kind of points out to you that those mission fields, if you want to call them that, are where God's presence needs to be the most, maybe. And so even though it's hard to be that person that's put there, maybe if you're surrounded by people who I don't want to say that everybody just like openly hostile to Christianity or anything, but just God just not playing a part in their
Right.
lives. It's just not a priority for them. Well, that's where the light needs to be shined some more. And so maybe God's putting you there for a reason. And he's going to support you.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, Ken. I know back maybe 15, 20 years ago when printing companies were viable, the press room wasn't the best place to be for, the conversation and profanity and just, you figure every day after the end of the shift, they would go to the bar together.
Mm-hmm.
These guys would hang out. So to just stay away from that does no one any good. You almost have to go ahead and dive in and not be afraid of what you're going to run into, that mission field, for example, that you're talking about. You got to be included in that. Your light needs to shine, and you need to be that light for others.
The shining star.
And eventually, things start to turn around. When you walk in the room, you don't hear as much language going on, and things change, and people recognize and understand. So it takes time. Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen overnight, but you can have an influence, even if it is a small aspect of it.
Yeah, it's very smart.
And you know what? Just the importance of prayer, realizing that God's always with you. Pastor Jay was just talking in his sermon by the time this airs, it's been 2 weekends ago, but for us here, as we're filming it, it was this past weekend. about, that God abiding with you and what that means in the Greek as far as being like a continuing presence, not just, not like our human relationships, like, we all do things together here at the church,
Right.
but then we go our separate ways. And so we're still in relationship, but we're not necessarily together at, all times, obviously. Whereas when it talks about God abiding with us, He is there with
Right.
us at all times. And so understanding that even when we're out there in our professional world, whether it be in a job where we are being confronted with, challenges of this sort, or whether we're not, God is still there with us to support us. Because look, things come up no matter what. Even if you're not being confronted with, direct challenges to your faith, whether it just be the pressure of the clock or the, are we going to make enough money this time to make payroll, or
Right.
things like that. There's things that the job itself, the nature of being in the workforce, has certain stressors on it, and God's always going to be there for us.
Right. It's, thinking about this, when I first started working in 1986, I worked at one point directly with our CEO on a couple of projects, and at that point, he was probably a 70-year-old Holocaust survivor. So he certainly wasn't a Christian, but he was a God-fearing man. And, to this day, you still think about him. He really had a great, great, strong life ethic. He didn't want to do anything that was improper. He wanted to do what was right. And to these days, that still sticks in the back of my mind.
People influences.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any last thing that you want to share that you can think of that we haven't talked about so far, just generally about, how does your faith influence? How do you bring your faith with you into the workforce? Well, you know what? Before I do closing thoughts, let me ask you this particularly, because we did a show a long time ago, and I think it was the fourth show I want to say we ever did. It was the first one we ever filmed, but it was actually the fourth one to air, and I can't remember what it was called, but I remember Greg Durrett was on it and Liz Carper was on it. And one of the things that Liz was talking about on that show was, she worked for the government, all right? And so there were restrictions on what she could say. So I guess my question is, let's assume that you've got people that for one reason or another in a work environment where they can't say the name Jesus, all right? They're getting fired if they do, all right? What are some ways, just day-to-day stuff? I know, not overcharging, things like that, but I'm just talking about the way if you wake up in the morning and you decide, I'm going to work today, I'm going to show Jesus to everybody that I come across to at work today. What does that mean? How do you show Jesus to people when you go to work?
It's your attitude. I mean, you have an upbeat attitude and loving life. That's contagious. You go into your group, the work group that you're in, and people are wondering, why are they so happy, or what makes them the way they are today? It's a rainy, lousy day. Why are they upbeat? The boss is hollering at us. You've got to overcome that. You've got to know that God's with you. He'll walk you through anything you need, and have that attitude and that spirit goes a long way. They might not be able to talk about it, but they see it. Everyone sees it.
Yeah, kind of parking our challenges behind Jesus, stepping into the office and trying to be as positive and have a great outlook on everything, and hopefully, that carries through the entire week. And sometimes, after Sunday sermon, everybody's kind of jazzed up and ready to start Monday, and then by middle of the week, you're like, oh, gee. But I think you have to kind of lift yourself up and continue to be as positive and promising as possible.
And I think that also can open opportunities to you. I mean, if you are positive, then sometimes people might want to know why. What I have found is, even in situations where maybe I can't say, you can't start talking openly about the gospel, or your boss will come in and fire you. And yet certain things come up. Like, I think it might have been you and I, Mark, talking about one previous episode. Either that, I'm confusing with somebody else. But that's really the only two options. But talking about, hey, what are you doing tonight? Well, I'm going to passion play rehearsal at my church. Well, that's not me explicitly telling you about the gospel, but all of a sudden the door's been opened just by talking about, hey, what are you doing tonight? And so if you are an open person, you are a friendly person, then people are going to be more likely to want to talk to you, and then God might open those types of doors.
And make those opportunities available to those people. That, hey, if you need to talk after hours or whatever, let me know. I'll meet you somewhere or whatever.
I think it takes a lot. It takes a lot to come out of your comfort zone to kind of open that door up.
Yeah. Well, I think that gets back to what you were saying earlier. It's like, it's not going to be comfortable at
Right.
first. So, but you know how you get comfortable? By doing it.
Right. Practice makes perfect.
Practice makes
Close to perfect. Yeah. No one's
approaching perfect.
None of us are perfect.
What is that? What's the math term? It's like a limit, right? Or something where you like approaching something, you're never quite getting at it. Yeah, my wife's the math person, not me.
I was told there'd be no math today.
And on that note, so any other closing thoughts about anything that we have that you want to mention that we haven't shared yet?
Just a joy to be here.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
All right.
That's fun.
Well, I appreciate it. Hey, we hope you enjoyed this episode too. Do me a favor, if you did like this episode, go ahead and click the like button. That's a thumbs up button right here on the YouTube page. Also, if you could, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Remember, everything I told you at the start of the show, we got coming up in September. Now's the time to subscribe if you haven't already done so. Share this video, share the channel, tell people about what we've got coming up. My wife's trying to communicate something to me. What? Patreon. She wants me to mention the Patreon. More information on that. I don't know if that's going to be up and running as far as more details by the time this airs. It might be. But one of the things we've got coming up in addition to all this new programming is we are starting up a Patreon. A Patreon, for those that aren't familiar with it, this is kind of the go-to mechanism for supporting art on the internet, for lack of a better word. We're actually obviously getting very ambitious, I guess, with the programming slate, the programming schedule, to try to have multiple options out there that are going to reach as many of you as possible that will appeal to you. That's not possible without, we're not going to be able to maintain that level without support from the viewership. So Patreon is a mechanism that you can use to help support the channel here, to help us keep this type of programming coming. And there's various different levels. There's various different tiers of support, as little as like $2 a month, and it works up from there. And different tiers come with different benefits. So whatever tier works best for you, you select that tier, and then you'll see once we get the Patreon website up and running, we will let you know. We'll have a formal announcement, and you can receive whatever the benefit is for the particular tier you sign up for. I will say, to plug Mark's printing business, that one of those tiers does come with a free Trinity Talk Live mug. That is one of the benefits.
And
so,
sure. Yeah.
So if we get enough people to sign up, see, it works out for both of us. Then more people are eating mugs, and so that works out. So stay tuned for more information about that Patreon as it becomes available. We really do need your support, and we really appreciate it. So let's see. There's no episode next week. We will be back the following week, the weekend. So not Labor Day weekend, but the following week is we're going to be coming back with an episode, What is Evangelism? That is going to be featuring a number of members of the evangelism team here at Trinity. Something that we're doing as a church now is we have, the way we're organized, we have a number of ministry teams that all have a particular focus, whether it be evangelism, whether it be discipleship, things like that, for the different types of ministry that we do here at Trinity. And every month, we're going to be having an episode of Trinity Talk Live. We're going to be inviting members of those teams to come on and talk a little bit about what we do. Not only just to inform our own congregation about here's what your teams do, but to give some ideas out there to other congregations about, what types of ministries you might not be thinking of that you can do in ways we can serve God in multiple different ways. It's not, evangelism is an important one. We're starting out with that one, but it is by no means the only ministry out there. And I think honestly, I think what a lot of people think, church ministry, that's what they tend to focus on evangelism in some way, and that scares them, maybe, because people, like we were talking about comfort zone, maybe that they don't feel it's in their comfort zone. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to get that into your comfort zone. As a matter of fact, the following week after the evangelism episode, Ben Lander and I are going to do one that's more focused on how to talk to people and how to get more comfortable talking to people. So we're actually spending kind of 2 weeks on that. But that's also, there's other avenues that your church can be participating in, that our church does participate in, other types of ministries where you might be called to. So make sure you join us. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Again, I already mentioned that. I'm going to mention it again, because I really want people to subscribe. So anything else I forgot, honey, while we're talking, you want to remind me about? No? Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for coming on again.
Thank you.
I hope that we were saying something that encouraging people out there about how you bring your faith outside the church walls and let it influence even how you're doing your professional life. Thank you all for watching. See you in 2 weeks, and God bless.
In your word we will find